Thank you.
What do you make of this withdrawal of the US, and has that worsened the situation in Iraq?
Well, the situation in Iraq, where we're seeing it now, actually really began in 2003 with the US invasion of Iraq and subsequent occupation. Even the Sunni-Shia kind of tensions that we're seeing now exploding with massacres taking place, etc., as you pointed out, those kind of tensions didn't exist in the same kind of way before the US invasion. When the US occupied Iraq, one of the many plans for Iraq was that they would actually divide Iraq and in a sense dismember it politically and culturally, etc., divide it into three parts: Sunni, Shia, and Kurd. And in a sense, that was the beginning of the tension that we saw erupting, the kind of anti-Shia feeling, anti-Sunni feeling that erupted in different ways. And so, really, they were the beginning of what we're seeing now.
So it's almost like apartheid-style divisions between the groups. Is that what you're saying?
That's what they were proposing. It didn't exactly happen like that. But because of the demographics and the way that the communities are spread in Iraq, it was easy to kind of create those divisions.
Was Iraq ready for the withdrawal of the US troops in the first place, you think?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think that the US troops should have been there in the first place. But what they did after they occupied Iraq was that they really broke down many of the institutions of state. So they completely dismantled the Iraqi army. Many of the other institutions of state were dismantled. And so when they pulled out, they left, in a sense, a pseudo-state, a state with many of its institutions not existing, attempting to create a new army, for example. And so I think that from that perspective, if we forgive them for everything that went before, then we could say that the withdrawal was premature.
But is the current government equipped to deal with these incidents that's currently happening in the country?
No, they're not. I mean, certainly in terms, from a military perspective, they're not. And you saw with the fall of the city of Mosul, for example, Iraqi soldiers just dropped their weapons and ran. So they're not equipped to deal with it either militarily or politically. And certainly from the perspective of kind of social cohesion within the country, it's not favorable to dealing with the kind of threat that ISIS presents because over the past few years as well, the divisions have been increasing.
What do we know about this ISIL who claimed that they killed 1,700 Shia soldiers in the country?
Okay, let me give you, to put it into perspective. It used to be called the Islamic State of Iraq, this organization, then moved into Syria and then called itself the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham, the Levant. It's so extremist that it was an affiliate of Al-Qaeda. It's so extremist that it has been denounced by Al-Qaeda. And more than one Al-Qaeda leader has denounced them for their extremism, for their brutality, and called on them to withdraw from Syria where they're involved. In Syria, they've probably killed more rebel fighters than they've killed regime soldiers. Their theology is very extreme, very anti-Shia, and so much of the rhetoric that you've heard coming out over the past week or so has been about them attacking Shia sites, etc. So it's really an extremist organization. In a sense, they've been allowed to operate, to grow in Syria in particular, because they serve the agenda of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, the United States, etc. So although they might be regarded as terrorists, they were allowed to operate in some kind of way because they had the same enemy. I think some of that is coming back to bite their supporters.
Now, opposition parties in the US suggest that Iraq might be a breeding ground for another 9/11, a similar attack like that. What do you make of that? Is that maybe a suggestion that one could look at and say that they are correct?
I would be careful about that kind of thing. Many of these groups, ISIS included, Al-Qaeda more generally, their targets usually are more within the Arab Muslim world, if you like, than outside. So yes, you had the 9/11 situation, you had Spain in Madrid, you had the London bombing, for example, but those are not the normal theaters of operation. And at the moment, their focus is on Iraq and Syria, and they claim that they want to create whatever that means, an Islamic state covering Syria and Iraq. I don't think there's any indication yet that they want to target any Western country. This is also why I think that Obama and the White House are very careful about making it clear that they don't want to put troops on the ground, etc., because that will then open them up to that kind of threat.
In closing, Naeem, do you see any light to the end of the tunnel of this Iraqi issue?
You know, I mean, this situation in a sense has been going on for more than a decade now, and the instability and the violence, it's getting worse now. What we're going to see is Iraq is virtually on the brink of a civil war at the moment. I think we're going to see Iranian troops coming in. We're going to see a bolstering of the Iraqi army, and probably a pushing back of ISIS in the next few weeks. But I think there's going to be lots more bloodshed before that happens.
Naeem Jenah, thank you so much for your time and joining us here on AM News. That was Naeem Jenah, who is the director of the Afro-Middle East Centre. That's